All right, guys, and we are back after the shellacking that Oklahoma gave Arkansas State. I believe that's the right word to use there. 73-0. When was the last time we saw Oklahoma score that many points and then shut an opponent out? Definitely not something you would have seen in the previous regime because Brent Venables kept his foot on the gas. But today, I am joined by Cooper over there at Unfair Sports. How you doing today?
Man, it's good to wake up in a college football season, and this is a performance that you enjoy, and you enjoy rewatching the game and picking out some more nuggets. But yeah, man, I'm ready to get the season down, get it going.
Yeah, and it's on a Saturday where it feels like a lot of teams struggled. A lot of teams. I mean, you saw Georgia early in the game with UT Martin. Like it was in the second quarter, and that game was like 14-0. I'm like, what's going on there? You saw Baylor drop at the Texas State. You saw Oklahoma State for some reason hanging there with like an FCS team. So it seems like teams across the college football landscape struggled, and Oklahoma just went in there and took care of business, and that's what you want to see. But yeah, well, we're just gonna go ahead and dive into it. 73-0. Definitely something that I don't feel like we've seen in a while in terms of just one appear putting points up on the board. It felt like in the previous regime, they would take their foot off the gas a little bit. So you'd only get into the high 50s, maybe the low 60s, and then also a shutout. I mean, you score 73 points and shut your opponent out, regardless what it is. They're a Division I football team. Butch Jones is still a good coach. He had good teams out there at Tennessee, and I mean, he has a good. I'm not gonna say a good team, but a decent team this year, right? A team that's gonna be able to compete with their schedule. So I look at this and go for Oklahoma. It's a good win. There are things you can take away from this and learn, like, hey, they got to clean up some of those penalties. But outside of that, there's not really a whole lot you can take away and just go, okay, Oklahoma did this wrong, and this is what they need to fix. So, what were some of your biggest takeaways from this game?
Number one is there was a plan last year, and even though Venables kind of backtracked and said should have played some more younger guys, there was a plan. That plan last year was to prep and to start laying the foundation for what Brent Venables wanted on defense, what he wanted on offense. We struggled through that year, but here's the main thing: is you play the game that's in front of you, and we came out and played the game that was in front of us. You dominate from the get go. They threw up the stat right there. That right from the get go. I mean, what was it like? OU scored 14 points in the first, and in a minute and 3 seconds. The script that you write out, 7 plays. You got a deep pass to Andrell Anthony. You got Tawi Walker running in and putting his shoulder pads into linebackers and safeties, and then so you score in 7 plays. Looks great, right? And then you come out on defense, and the defense shows up, and they don't mess around. They get in there, they get after it. You saw people flying to the ball. You saw people flying upfield. You saw people, making tackles, and that was what you wanted to see. You force a 3 and out on your first defensive, possession of the year. And then G Freaky goes G Freaky. And I mentioned it to you in the green room. And if this is a tradition that every first touch of Gavin's season goes for a touchdown, I'm for it. You saw what everybody had been talking about in the offseason with Gavin Freeman, and he absolutely showed out yesterday. The defense was competing. The cornerbacks, I felt good about that. There is, usually in a 73-0, there's probably not a ton of stuff that you can go back from a coaching standpoint and really just say, guys, we're not there yet. But there were opportunities. And one of them is the alignments in the secondary. There were a lot of times that they just straight up were out of position, and the Arkansas State receivers just dropped balls. There were times that receivers fell down. And so there's an opportunity for Jay Valai and Brent Venables to get in there, and Ted Roof, and say, all right, here's some things that we got to have happen. And so defensive line, an absolute, showing right there. They were stopping the run. What did you say? I think it was like 42 yards rushing, in the 40 range rushing. That's terrific. There's not much different that you can get in that. But they were running max protect quite often. We were running a vanilla defense. And they were also, in the middle of 3-step drops. And lastly, I would say that, you and I talked about in the green room too, is, that happened a little bit last year, to where if you add, a third or a quarter of a second more, you see a lot more disruption. You see some interceptions, you see some batted balls, you see some sacks and tackles for losses. You're going to see that. But, I've got a couple ideas on, on the defensive line. They were missing R. Mason Thomas. A lot of guys were just getting in there and competing. And, that offensive line, they did not want to let Oklahoma get any type of momentum in the backfield. And it happened on the run game, and it happened on some of the swing passes and stuff like that. We saw Gentry Williams absolutely beat his wide receiver and destroy somebody for a 5 or 6 yard loss. That's what you want to see. And so, you can see things in there to where you're going to pick out. I mean, only Oklahoma fans, right? Can watch 73-0 and then have complaints about things. Offensively, I don't know if there's anything offensively that you looked at and you went, I'm concerned about XYZ. It was terrific.
Yes, and I know some people here, they're going to jump into the comments and they're going to say, hey, well, Preston, you said that this is the first time in a while that we've seen Oklahoma dominate in this fashion, 73-0. Hold shut up. I get it. In 2021, we held Western Carolina to 76-0. That's an FCS opponent, right? You should probably score 100 on an opponent like that and definitely not allow them to score. In 2019, Oklahoma played South Dakota and allowed them to score 14 points. They did put up 70 there. And then in what was it, in 2020, the COVID year, they played Missouri State. They had a shutout, but they only scored 48 points against Missouri State. So my point is, you played a Division I football team and went out there and completely shellacked them. But I look at some of the biggest key takeaways from this game, and I heard this on the radio, and I thought it was an incredible stat. Over 29 defensive players made the stat sheet yesterday. And I tried to go back and just look at some games, like some of these blowout losses, and find one where 29 people, I couldn't find it. I think the most I could find was like 17 or 18 people. So when Brent Venables has talked about this competitive depth for so long this year, and you've heard all these assistants talk about it, this is exactly what they mean. Everybody up and down this roster for Oklahoma can go out there and they can play, and they can compete with each other, and everybody can vie for a spot on this team. And that's not something that we've been able to say in the past. So I thought that was interesting there. And then one of the biggest takeaways I took was Dillon Gabriel. Although I get it was Arkansas State, looked extremely accurate in this game. A lot more accurate than he did last year. He was putting the ball in the right places. And I think a lot of that could be tied to, last year I said it, you lost Kel Gundy, not the Kel Gandhi that I was talking about earlier in our group text, but Kel Gundy last year. And, I felt like that really hurt the wide receiver room for Oklahoma. I really felt like the wide receiver room, they weren't running the right routes. You didn't have guys in the right spots. And the Dillon Gabriel coming off that injury, trying to shake off all that rust, he never got a good chance to put it together. But you really saw him just dropping dimes to these wide receivers. And props to Nick Anderson and Jaden Gibson for really being able to make themselves a name in this game. I feel like those are two guys OU fans have really been watching. They've really been waiting to have a breakout year. And you saw Nick Anderson take it down the sideline. You saw Jaden Gibson fighting for it in the corner out there. This wide receiver room and what Emmett Jones is doing there, if this is any indication of how the season's going to go, I'm really excited. So we might have a game like Colorado where you might have 4 wide receivers over 100 yards, which, by the way, I thought was an impressive stat on their part. But those were kind of some of the takeaways I took from this game. I don't know if you have any thoughts on those wide receivers in that core, but they looked really good.
Yeah. So I want to start out with Jaquez Petaway. 9 catches. And there were multiple times that I was looking at him, and you get the idea that he is quick as hell, and he is going to, you see some of these routes that he cuts. He sets guys on for a slant and then breaks to the outside, and he's wide open. And a little bit better blocking from the wide receivers on a couple of those catches, and he throws up more than the 56 yards that he had, but still very, very impressive. Nick Anderson and Jaden Gibson. You wanted to see these guys make something. And with Jaden Gibson, you have a little bit of that feeling of like, how in the heck does he make that back fade catch, with full on impressive body control and then miss some of the other catches. I think that on the preview with you, I said, I want to see him catch something. It doesn't need to be a breakaway touchdown. It doesn't need to be something glory. It needs to just be a solid catch. And I think that, he had 2 catches for 54 yards, the touchdown, and he had that one right there. That's impressive. Nick Anderson, he has that deep ball down the sideline. That was an absolute, beautiful throw by Dillon. And again, you throw the ball, you catch the ball, that's it. The only thing that could have been better is if he could have shook that last guy and made it in the end zone. Andrew Anthony goes deep multiple times. You saw that very first play, that first deep ball on the first drive when Dillon threw it deep to Andrew. That defensive back was not going to let that catch happen. He was pulling on his jersey, trying to tackle him, and Andrew still dove and caught the ball. A couple other balls that Dillon threw. Don't forget, this is probably, if not the fastest, one of the fastest, excuse me, guys on the receiver corps. But he is. There were multiple times, and I think Dillon threw one of those deep balls for pass interference, and it was an absolute rainbow that was an underthrow. But again, it's in the NFL, you take the ball, inside the 10-yard line on one of those and inside the red zone on another. So you're good. You saw that they did not want to get out of there. You saw Cade McIntyre and Blake Smith make some catches from the tight end position. They didn't ask much of anything from Stogner, but Cade McIntyre looked like a freak of an athlete, and he is going to be a good one. He does not know what he's doing yet. He has played, a lot of defense, and that's a little bit of fight, and that shows you what the defensive, depth chart looks like. Because we had 18 guys on the defensive line on the depth chart, and so he's over here playing tight end, and that was another terrific piece. And then lastly, LV Bunkley Shelton. You saw him in there. You saw him make some plays. So if you, again, and I said this in the green room, Cale Gundy did an amazing amount of stuff for Oklahoma between running backs, assistant coach, wide receivers, everything like that. Washington last year, it was put in a bad spot. And now this year, you don't have a one guy like a Marvin Mims to take that receiver room. But between the recruiting trail and what you've seen from development, if you do not cherish Emmett Jones while he's here, because I don't see OU not elevating him, after the season to try to keep him around, because people are going to come want him on their staff at some point. And, he is one of the most crucial pieces to our offense right now. So yeah, I'm just happy. I'm smiling because did not matter which, and I know we'll probably touch on this, did not matter which quarterback was throwing to these wide receivers. These guys were making plays, and that's what you ask for.
Yeah, like how you mentioned, doesn't matter which quarterback, because Jackson Arnold came in there and he lit it up. What did he go? 11 of 11?
11.
Didn't miss a beat. You don't expect that from a true freshman. In their very first game, I don't care who they're playing, you expect them to make mistakes, probably overthrow the ball, whatever. Jackson Arnold looked really in sync with Petaway. He was, just dropping it to him the whole time. So, and then he threw that past Jaden Gibson in the corner of the end zone. So, I think the future of Oklahoma football is good with Jackson Arnold. But I really like what you took from the team this week. You took some good things. Obviously, I think the team can take away some things that they can work on. But, if you look at the trenches for Oklahoma, the defensive line looked a lot better, because I think I was telling you 48 rushing yards is what was on the stat sheet. 10 of those yards was from their quarterback due to a pressure. So he rolled out and got a 10-yard gain. So really only 38 rushing yards. So I get people will have their complaints about applying that pressure to the quarterback and getting the sacks. But in reality, this defensive line was just really good. Like you said, the quarterback just got the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. But I think next week, Oklahoma will have a chance to showcase that defensive line a little bit more. You're going to SMU, and SMU looked pretty good with Preston Stone at the quarterback position. He threw 3 touchdowns for 248 yards. Wasn't the most accurate, 23-37, but he does look like a guy that might sit in the pocket a little bit longer. So I feel like we're going to get a better understanding of what this defensive line will look like next week. But just looking at the trenches of what Oklahoma did this week, the offensive line from
Burrow.
backups to the starters. I mean, I think we were both on the same page about Andrew Raym. I mean, the dude was straight
Yeah.
pancaking people out there.
That is Andrew Rames. If it's not his best game he's ever played, it's tied. And you saw a couple times that you zoom in, and Andrew Rame is just destroying some folks. You saw what did you? I don't know if you picked up on this one, and maybe you have to go back and watch it because again, I started to rewatch it last night, made it about halfway through the game, and then I had to tap out. But I mean, Walter Rouse was pulling in a lot of cool concepts, and that is a humongous human being. I mean, if you are a light 240-pound defensive end or a linebacker coming around the corner, and you see Walter Rouse coming around and he has his hands on you, that's not an optimal situation for you. I saw Jake Taylor a couple times flash really, really well. Caden Green looked great. You saw nothing concerning from that starting offensive line, and you saw nothing blow up. Even when Jackson Arnold was our third leading rusher. We ran for more yards than Arkansas State had the entire game. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and let me scroll up here, is, Jackson Arnold was responsible for 114 yards passing and 39 yards. So what is that? 41. He was about 40 yards less just individually. Your backup quarterback is responsible for about 40 yards less than the entire opposing team. So the offensive line is going to continue to be nasty. Savion Byrd looked great. Matire, he looks like a baller. You cannot, goodness gracious, you just can't. You can't look for more impressive offensive line showing. And it had, again, this is kind of a slapstick first announcing crew, but one of the announcers said this is one of the best offensive lines he's ever seen ever, and he said this could be the best offensive line in the country. Again, Arkansas State, but you play the team in front of you, and you have to perform like you are the best offensive line in the country. And they did that. And then, if you're a Butch Jones fan, not a Butch Jones fan, I've never remembered. Even watching Francione and Texas A&M lose 77-0, you didn't see an absolute picture of someone whose soul has been taken from their body, as you saw with Butch Jones. Butch Jones looked beside himself, behind himself, and he looked like he might want to go coach basketball because it looked terrible. Dude was on his. That is the most forlorn I've ever seen a head coach, just on his knee, just looking and just going like, what? Now, a lot of that was Oklahoma, and a lot of that, I don't know if you recognize that, between field goals, extra points. I think they had 4 false starts on field goals and extra points, and that kicker was a Lou Groza finalist last year for the best kicker in the land, and he misses 2 badly. That was, it was terrific. It was, I hate, bless you, Butch Jones, and hopefully you're having a better Sunday than you had Saturday. I can't see how it'd be worse.
Yeah, and I'll say the defense definitely got some help there because there were a lot of penalties from Arkansas State.
Yeah.
And the amount of times that they had a face mask or an offside in that game was unreal. I was like, I lost track. But the offensive line, this does look like an offensive line that can win a Joe Moore Award. But an interesting question to ask you is, so obviously we have 4 guys that are going to be seniors. They're graduating out this year. Then you have Tyler Guyton, who, if he has a good enough year, he'd go to the league. How many guys do you think get drafted in the first round, offensive lineman wise, for Oklahoma this year?
You got Tyler Guyton, who people said that TCU just didn't have him in the plans. And so he comes over, and right from the get-go, you had a lot of pundits who, like a Gabe Eichert, who obviously has played with some of the best offensive linemen. He was, went to the NFL, and he played on multiple teams. He immediately was right behind him. Josh McCutcheon from Sooner Scoop was also right behind him. Guyton, selfishly, I wish that he gets like a 2nd-round grade at the end of the year and thinks, I just want to better this opportunity. But offensive linemen are going to get drafted a little bit higher. Walter Rouse is a guy who came over, and he was just supposed to be a nice offensive piece. He looks like he's a guy who could press. Right now he's a day 2 guy with more film and more flexibility and, better technique. he's a guy who can slide in, and you never know, because you're going to get one of these Super Bowl contenders, high playoff contenders who have a pick at the end of the first round, and they just are a couple offensive linemen away from better control of the line of scrimmage, and they'll take an opportunity with them. Andrew Rame continues to do what he did this year. Remember, we've said it ad nauseum. Andrew Rame in the COVID year didn't have the opportunity to really come in and get in the weight room. The next 2 years, he has some injuries, and he doesn't have the opportunity to hit the weight room. He had that opportunity this year. He was healthy, and he got in there, and you can see it after game one. Now, I got to say that Savion Byrd has the opportunity to really push himself up draft boards, and you want to see them more of that nasty. Offensive guards always have an issue with sliding into the first round, but you've got great opportunity across the board, and you need more playing time, because you're going to have a new offensive line for Jackson Arnold next year. And so you want to see more of these guys rotate in. Next year, you're going to have Jake Taylor, Jake Sexton, Caden Green. Hopefully Josh Bates gets some playing time later down the road. But, again, this is another Bill Bedenbaugh special. Come in, and if you looked at our offensive line performance last night versus the spring game, it's two different scenarios. You're missing some pieces in the spring, but it looked silly.
So over under 2 in the first round this year.
I'm calling 2 in the first round, because I just don't, again, and that's going to be tough. I'm pretty set on Tyler Guyton. Walter Rouse, he has the opportunity to work himself there.
All right. Over under 2. I'm thinking you could have 3. Thinking you could have Rame. You could have, if Rame has a good enough season, Walter Rouse and Tyler Guyton. And if that's the case, if Oklahoma, I don't know how Oklahoma doesn't recruit 5-star offensive linemen after that. You put 3 in the NFL draft, they've got to turn their heads at that point. Michael Fasusi's got to want to shut it down. Which, speaking of, looking at some of those guys that visited, Michael Fasusi actually was not able to make it on campus. But looking at some of the visitors that were on campus, because I sat right above them, looked like they were having a lot of fun. Got a chance to go talk to Daniel Okoye and Daniel Akinkumi. Daniel Akinkumi was absolutely having a blast for his first college experience, although he said it was hot. It's a little bit hotter probably in London right now, but looked like Oklahoma was doing a good job with some of those officials and unofficial visitors. I believe we saw Terry Bussey couldn't exactly make it out, and he might have left early if that was actually him. So might be something for Oklahoma fans to keep an eye on. But outside of that, just looking at the game, I was really impressed with Oklahoma. I mean, 73 shutout. There's not, like I said, not a lot to complain about, a lot to praise the team for. They went out there and they took care of business. I did like how we got to see some Javonte Barnes. I don't know if we talked about it in the preview. I actually didn't think we'd see Javonte Barnes at all, along with the guy from Sawchuck. So it was nice to be able to see him. It was nice to be able to see Dalen Smothers and Caleb Hicks and see those guys be able to go out there and get touches. I think that's really important, really good. You really get to see the future of this Oklahoma team take shape. But other than that, I didn't really have anything else for the game this week. I mean, I'm looking ahead to SMU, and they beat Louisiana Tech 38-14. Like I said, Preston Stone goes out there and shows out as their new quarterback, one of their highest rated quarterbacks or players of all time out of their recruiting rankings. They had LJ Johnson Jr. rush for 128 yards. So this defensive line is going to have their hands full trying to keep him and Knighton contained on the rushing side. And then on the receiving yards, they had 4 players essentially catch more than 20 yards. So we'll have to see kind of exactly how our secondary is able to handle that. But SMU will be a little bit of a test. I don't think the biggest test. I think your big test, I think you and I both agree, is probably going to be Cincinnati.
Yeah, Cincinnati, I'm very, very up on Cincinnati. Emory Jones, 5 touchdowns. He balled out. Like, that's you play the people in front of you. I'm down on BYU now. You saw in the Texas game that JT Daniels, on his 111th team that he's played for in his college career, he just looked like he was who we thought was the old Dennis Green. They are who we thought they were. And he just threw some really, really curious throws. Keaton Slovis just looked, pedestrian at best. 2 200 yards. They beat, somebody at 14-0. And so it just, again, Cincinnati, they were going to come out. They had a chip on their shoulder. They wanted to show people that, just because our coach left and, our roster got gutted, we're not dead. We're still here. So, but that's why you play the game. And when we get to that Cincinnati game, it is going to be more of a test than I originally thought. BYU usually has a very, very good beginning of the year, and then they kind of fade. So maybe it's going to be the opposite, but this is good because, with the plans that we have, with what Oklahoma looked like yesterday, and some of the expectations that you and I and a lot of the other podcasters have talked about. That OU game went. I don't see how it goes better. The only thing is, people wanted to see 5 or 6 sacks, but we saw that last year early in the season. We threw a bunch of sacks and nothing happened after that. All those guys are bigger, better, faster, stronger, and you throw in some other guys. We didn't talk about PJ Adebaware. There was one third down where they rolled completely away from him, and he was a millisecond away from just destroying the Arkansas State quarterback. So, guys, get excited. We have game 2. We don't have to wait for another month. We don't have to wait for another 9 months for the season going. It is next week, and SMU will be a fun game. And again, SMU is trying to get into a power conference. They want in, and so they're going to try to show that they belong. And right now, the Big 12 could be open for pretty much everybody. And
SMU's going to the ACC now.
Yeah,
Cal, and Stanford.
Yeah, and they want to show that they belong. And so it is going to be a pretty cool opportunity for them to play, against Oklahoma, who just dropped a 73-0 burger. And I promise you that people are watching game film, and it's going to be hard to really put because which receiver do you key in on? Which running back do you key on? What do you try to do to Jackson Arnold? What do you try to do to Dillon Gabriel? And lastly, I'll say this: don't start calling for Jackson Arnold to start. Dillon Gabriel had one pass which bounced off of Farouk's hands. He didn't have any bad passes. He laid the ball up, received to make a play downfield a couple of times, and got pass interference calls. Dillon Gabriel is the undisputed leader of this team, and he did about as good as you can potentially do.
Am I crazy to say that Dillon Gabriel could be a 4,000-yard passer this year?
My over-under was 4,200. I think that he has that opportunity. Why? Because that running game. You've got Javonte Barnes, who ran for 49 yards, leading rusher. Talby Walker averaged 5.5, 2 touchdowns, 44 yards. Marcus Major came in. He had a touchdown. Dylan Smothers, who I didn't expect to see at all, he looked good. Now, he got hit in the backfield quite often. And Caleb Hicks had a touchdown, 3 carries for 14 yards. You had Jalil Farouk. We didn't even see any, Gavin Freeman spots. And so you saw a lot of the threat of those end arounds, and people are going to have to key into it, because if you have Gavin Freeman or Jalil Farouk or Jaquez Petaway coming around for an end around, you have a running back coming up the middle, and then you have either Dylan or Jackson available to take it themselves. What do you do? What do you do as a defense? You got to stay absolutely gap sound and hope to God that your defensive lineman doesn't get pancaked by Rame or Bird or Rouse or Guyton or Matire. And this is a load of an offense to deal with. And it was fast. It was Sam Bradford 08 fast. That at the beginning of the game, it was absolutely, we could have scored 100 plus on this team. And for a while there, it looked like it. But you saw us take down. We knew what was going on. And we're not even getting to special teams, because if you stop, if this defense, stops you, now you got to kick to Gavin Freeman, and you saw 2 different plays where there was the punt return touchdown, which he absolutely was electric. And then he had the other one where he ran for 85 yards for like a 30-yard return, and it was electric. So, I do not envy the defenses. This is the offense that we are used to seeing.
Yes, and not to overreact, but I do look at what happened around college football yesterday and what Oklahoma did. And I say, just after week 1, if I had to evaluate after week 1, really, I don't want to make this evaluation till after the Tulsa game, but uh, I believe the only game Oklahoma should really probably lose at this point or have a chance at losing is Texas, because TCU just did not look like the team that they were last year. And as I said, earlier in the year, they have to play Baylor, Texas Tech, Kansas State all before they play Oklahoma. So there's a
Yeah.
chance that, they're just gassed by that time. So
Yeah.
I look at that and I go, hey, Oklahoma, by the end of the season, they could be 11-1. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how good they looked yesterday. That's how bad everybody else looked. So I have pretty good faith that this team is going to go do great things this year. So I think
And
your biggest
again,
question marks, I think that will test Oklahoma on the defensive side of the ball, Cincinnati, Texas, and UCF. UCF looked pretty good. So.
I mean, but you also saw Texas. The thing that we said going into the year was the offense looked phenomenal on paper, and the defense is going to be suspect. And it was the opposite. I mean, the one thing that you said is, listen, Quinn Ewers has to. I mean, he has to improve on his consistency, and they struggled for a long time with Rice, and they did what they were supposed to do. But again, what would we feel like right now if we were up, what was it, 24-7 or something like that, against Arkansas State at the half? We would be like, it's still good, but there would be some what ifs. And Texas, that offense did not look in sync. And you got to see the transformer come in and play a little bit, and they didn't really give him much to do. But Malik Murphy was the second string guy coming off coming in. So I watched a lot of that Texas game too, and there were just there was a lot of mistakes. I don't know if how vanilla they went, so I don't want to overreact like crazy. But that Texas offense, the one hurdle was the consistency from the quarterback, and we saw some inconsistency this week.
Yeah. I mean, Quinn Ewers went 19 of 30 for 260. Didn't have an interception though. 3 touchdowns. I think a lot of it's going to be Quinn Ewers figuring out who's going to be his number 1 and number 2. I mean, there's so many. I mean, he's got kind of the same situation Oklahoma's got, where you've got so much talent at the wide receiver position. It's like, all right, well, who are you going to pick out and who are you going to leave to the side? I think that's the problem. And then for Texas, when you looked at the rushing, they played more Jaden Blue and Jonathan Brooks, which I thought was interesting. They didn't give the ball as much to CJ Baxter, because I thought CJ Baxter would be their number 1 guy. But Texas is going to be interesting. I think they'll figure it out. I mean, their team is just extremely talented. Steve Sarkisian is a really good offensive mind. I don't feel like the offense is going to have that many problems. The defense for Texas actually looked pretty damn good yesterday. I think they had 2 sacks, so that was impressive on their part.
Yeah, and Baxter went down pretty hard like Drake Stoops did, so we might keep an eye on that too, because he was holding his collarbone. He had the same situation where he went down right and had somebody right on top of him too. And it was one of his runs that, he looks electric, but he looks like a freshman. So, we'll see that, because Jaden Blue, 10 carries, 55 yards, Jonathan Brooks, 12 for 52. You want to see a little bit more against Rice. CJ Baxter was averaging 7.6 carry. He had a 32-yard run. And so Xavier Worthy looked good. I feel like between Woody and Gentry, both of them are going to be bigger than Xavier Worthy. If I want to put a pin in that comment and say, even though you saw some penalties, you saw our defensive backs have some attitude. Reggie Pearson, I guess he didn't have field awareness. He dropped the guy on the sideline with a nice little shoulder.
See, I don't feel like that was a penalty. I feel like he was getting ready and the quarterback ran into him. I mean,
yeah. Well, I would feel that way, except for he was decently on the sideline, but still, like, I'm okay with that. You saw Billy Bowman take a couple chip shots at somebody. Billy Bowman had a face mask penalty. Again, if you're making a play on the ball and you make a penalty like that against a team like this, I'm not gonna pick you apart on that. That it is what it is. But I like seeing that there were several different defensive backs between corners and safeties at one point, and even Justin Harrington had a great game, that they wanted to say, hey, listen, it's a business decision if you come towards me. And you didn't see that Olay tackling ballerina strength and conditioning football that you saw under the last regime and Benny Wiley. You saw guys who wanted to make a name for themselves.
No, they definitely did. They definitely did. And I believe Oklahoma probably took some anger out on Arkansas State from last year. So that was definitely, I mean, and I want to point this out, and we can kind of end on this note, but we've talked about the pass rush and Oklahoma not getting as many sacks as everybody wanted. The only person that got a sack on this team is the one guy that for some reason Oklahoma fans just have a hard time loving, and that's Ethan Downs. He had one sack. So I want y'all to think about that, because Ethan Downs was kind of the leader right there with Reggie Grimes last year and getting to the backfield and causing some havoc. So I'll be curious to see where Ethan Downs actually lands on the depth chart going into conference play this year, because I noticed he wasn't out there with the starters to begin with. So, and I think Ethan Downs is probably one of your better players just because he's from the state. He's going to drive that competition, and Ethan Downs wants this. That's what he wants. So he wants to be on the field. Yeah. He wants to make a name for himself. But Cooper, appreciate you jumping on with me today and breaking down this 73-0 win for Oklahoma. I'm going to be saying that a lot lately. 73-0. We might need to put that on a t-shirt. I like to say that. But where can everybody find you guys? Because I know you guys got some good content coming out.
Yeah, check us out, Unfair Sports. We'll be going live tonight at 6 p.m. We had a special guest, but a little scheduling conflict last second. He's with we were going to have Sam Mays on tonight. He is doing the sellout where you see Barry Trammell and Jenny Carlson, and now Bob Stoops has announced that he is going to be a contributor. But they are running their first podcast tonight, so they had a bounce. But we have George Stoya coming up on Wednesday from Soonerscoop.com. And so if you don't know about George is a younger guy, came over from Denver, covering Denver Broncos last year, was hired by Sooner Scoop. He's putting out a ton of content out there. And we're going to have some other guys coming up here too. Like I said, always trying to stay up with PG and the phenomenal guests that you guys have.
No, appreciate it. And I'm sure you guys are going to have some phenomenal guests coming up as well. So I'm excited to see what content and who you guys have coming on the podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hey, listen, we all love to support each other out here. I know some people sometimes find it a little weird. Listen, we all love to support each other. It's a community. That's what this is. Yeah,
100%. And again, if you come on and your faithful followers check you out and vice versa, that's what we're doing, because we're trying to bring what we're passionate about, which is football, Oklahoma football, recruiting, and just college football in general. I mean, there's a reason why this is such a passion, and don't get it twisted. Just because NIL and transfer portal are out here this year, and going forward, this is still the same game that you love to watch every single weekend. And a lot of people are riding high this morning because they can say, hey, listen, we did 73-0. What did you do? And outside of Oregon, Oregon threw themselves in the ring last night too, with a nice beat down. But outside of that, there's not too many fan bases who are riding as high as, Oklahoma fans are right now.
Yeah. Hey, well, Oregon didn't have as fast as a start as Oklahoma did. So we can tout that part.
True.
So. All right. Well, appreciate you guys jumping on. If you guys haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and hit that subscribe button. If you guys are listening to this on Apple, Google, or Spotify, make sure you leave me 5 stars, write a review. I think on Spotify, you can even jump in and tell me what you guys are liking about each episode. So leave something there, guys, and we will definitely be reading those out over the coming weeks as we review games, preview games, and things like that. But until next time, Boomer.